Well, hello, everyone. Today I have a special guest on the Music Money podcast, Norma Michaels. Norma Michaels Entertainment is a 100% women-owned booking agency based out of Philadelphia. She books all sorts of musical acts, including easy listening, jazz, show bands, classical ensembles, dance bands performing top 40, Latin, Motown, hip-hop, and more to play for corporate events, high society events, weddings, fundraisers, and much more. In a career spanning over 4 decades, she's booked top show bands for events all over the U.S., as well as Finland, Sweden, Yugoslavia, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Japan. Now, the reason I was so excited to have Norma on the Music Money podcast is because Norma is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to musicians actually making great money, specifically through live performances. So what better person to have on a Music Money podcast? Norma, welcome. How are you today? Thank you for being on the show.
Every day is a great day.
Well, first off, I want to start off by giving the audience the connection and how we met. So we met through Dave Scott, who is the current guitarist in my band, which is Reverend Barry and the Funk, that's based in Sarasota, Florida. Dave is a full-time musician. He was a full-time musician based in New Jersey for about 30 years and made a lot of money playing in a top show band. And Norma did a lot of the booking for that band. And I was actually, when I first met Dave, I got to talking to him and saw that, he basically said he'd been a career musician, playing in, weddings and corporate events and those types of things. And he drives a BMW. He's got a really nice Indian motorcycle, a nice house. And I tell you, I'm just not used to seeing that with musicians that have made their career playing music and actually have a pretty nice, I guess material things, if you will, just to show for it. So, so he started kind of telling me about the business of that band, and I was really impressed. So I just, I know that you were responsible for a lot of those bookings. So I just thought this would be a great way for us to, for people to get to know this whole world that you live in. So could you give the audience an idea? They could talk about money right out of the gate, but that is kind of what the podcast is about. What kind of the pay scale might be for the different types of bands that you booked, from smaller acts all the way to the big show bands?
Oh, wow. It just varies so much. It really depends. If you're talking about a casino booking for a lounge, they don't pay so well, especially now since the pandemic. They're just getting started again. And again, if you're talking about a restaurant or a club, I don't think that they have much of a budget. The best money is in the private events, either social or corporate, where they're looking for really hip, great music, but with a really sophisticated look and a real touch of, touch of elegance.
Okay.
I think a lot of it is they're hearing a lot of it through what they see. So it really depends on how the band is presenting itself, whether it's ready for prime time or not.
Yeah, and I have a lot of questions about that. So for the purposes of this interview, I'd like to maybe kind of go back to pre-pandemic times, because I'm sure I'm as hopeful as you that things will get back to normal sometime within the year. So like maybe kind of think about, okay, how are things pre-pandemic, because that obviously screwed up the whole musical world, hopefully for a short time period, grand scheme of things. So I guess, so like for a band that really has their act together, that's that has a great reputation, that they've got maybe they've been doing this for 5-10 years, what are some of those? What are they looking at financially, do you think?
Well, I think for a private event, depending on the size of the band, they can look to net for the band anywhere between $5,000 and $9,000, and that would be marked up by the agency or whomever is doing the booking, the event planner, whoever is involved. But the band will be well paid if they're worth it, and only if they're worth it. Okay.
Well, I definitely want to dig into those details as far as what makes a band worth it. And just just to get a little bit about my background as well. I mean, prior to Dave, my band's been together for about 8 years, and then prior to that, a few of the guys in the band were part of a wedding band that made it our goal to try to play high-end weddings in Florida, which there are a lot of, because it is it's a destination wedding capital, and it's, there's two coasts with beautiful beaches. Everybody wants to get, married in Florida, and, and we played some pretty high-end events, and, and I have tried to communicate that to musicians that are not familiar with this whole world, that, the only world that they've ever really known is, playing in a cover band at the bar down the street, maybe making $150 per guy. And then you tell them, look, it really is possible to get paid, like you said, $5 to $9 grand or even more. Sometimes it's even sort of hard for them to believe, but it is out there. But obviously, it's like you said, if they're worth it. So we'll dive into what makes a band like that worth it. So if you have a top act like that really has their act together, I mean, how many shows would a band like that be able to expect? I guess what I'm driving at is, how does a guy like a Dave Scott and other guys like him truly make a living doing this? Because even if you make, $5 grand or whatever, if you're only getting a gig once per quarter, that's not really going to work. I mean, how much could they expect to play per year in normal times?
Well, each time they play a job, they should be that sensational that they walk away with at least several referrals, which turn into more jobs. So I'm trying to think about how many jobs Dave Scott played back in the day, pre-pandemic.
You would make every weekend, or was it more than one show per weekend?
Definitely a show every weekend, if not 2, and sometimes 3, and occasionally a weekday, because corporate very often will book on a weekday. Social events are usually Friday, Saturday, and Jewish events very often are on Sundays. So, depending on the band, they can be kept very busy as long as they're on top of their game. And they've got to make sure that they are playing and looking that special at each event, because you just never know who's going to be there and how many referrals you can walk away with.
Now, I don't know how many different, because you've been in Philly pretty much your whole career, is that right? Or...
Yes, I'm based out of Philadelphia, and I was booking when I was a partner with the New York company. I was booking up to as far as central New Jersey and anything south of there, including, Philadelphia, South Jersey, the seashores, and Delaware.
Okay. So, I don't know if you even know the answer to this question, but maybe you run into other agencies that are, around the country. Do you feel like that this is a regional thing as far as what a high-end band like this could, demand big money, like, because I'm originally from Southern Indiana. I wasn't involved in that type of act when I was in Indiana. I just kind of wonder, is this only a New York thing? Is this only a New Jersey thing where bands are getting that kind of money, and then, the scale goes way down as you move into the Midwest or maybe the South? Or do you know?
I don't know, but I would think that in the Midwest, the demand, the price for a band would be less. It's always more, coastal, as well as on the West Coast. You're probably commanding the same kind of figures in California as you would be in New York, Pennsylvania, eastern Pennsylvania anyway, and New Jersey.
Right.
And Florida, depending on the part of Florida, and I know that I've done most of my Florida bookings have been in the Palm Beach, Delray, that vicinity of Florida, which is southeast. So I don't know how things go in say, the southwest part of Florida. But I know that in the Palm Beach, that region, even down, to Boca, or whether it's up or down to Boca, they're commanding similar prices to New York and my area, Philadelphia region.
Do you think that's because they have a large New Yorker population in those areas?
I think it's a socioeconomic thing. I think that the people have the funds and they're willing to spend it for as long as they can get what they want. They'll spend it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, when I was in the wedding band that was doing it, pretty much in Florida, wedding season, it's at the same time as snowbird season, which is pretty much from the beginning of around November till Easter, because it's too hot the rest of the time. But we would stay pretty busy every weekend. We did do a lot of gigs along about, like I said, the Southwest coast. What we did find is if we went into Miami, there were some really high-end bands that were doing that, but they were all Latin. So I think that there's, and there were bands that were commanding $15, $20,000, but some of them were big-time show bands, with lots of dancers and all that kind of thing. And you see some of that in Orlando as well, where there's a big talent pool, where you do have incredible musicians and singers that are doing work for Universal or Disney, and then on the side they're also doing these show bands. So. Okay, so say then if you have a band like that is doing really well, kind of going back to your area, is there a lot of travel involved, or is it just,
it's usually regional.
Are most gigs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say it's regional. I mean, a couple of years ago, I had a call from someone in Turkey, Istanbul, who needed a band for what she called the wedding of the year. So it was a wealthy family, and they were willing to fly the band in from New York and put them up for a couple of days in a hotel and feed them and have them perform. And they had the money to spend, and they were happy to spend it. So, but that's a bit unusual when you get a call from overseas to send your band. It's mostly regional, and there's so many venues, high-end venues, that will have the clientele able and willing to spend the money for a top-notch band. So it really depends, I would say, on connecting with either an agency or an individual who is tied into those people that are the spenders, I would say.
Yeah, because I have to wonder if somebody calls you from Turkey. Number one, I mean, there's a lot of agents they could call in the United States, or a lot of bands. Did that person just happen to know you from something, or had they already seen the band before?
Well,
or
that was a relationship that I developed when I was booking a jazz club in Istanbul. I was sending jazz musicians to this club, and the person who was booking the club kept my information, and when she had that need for a band, she was in touch with me. So it's a lot about relationships, of course, on my end, on the booking agency event planner end. And, some of these relationships you develop over the years. So I think that's why it's important for the band leader to tie in with someone who knows, who's been there, done that, and will continue to do it for them.
And that I want to skip ahead to that topic as far as, because there may be some people on here that are listening to the podcast and think, why do I need an agent? In this world of the internet, I could, like when I was in the wedding band, the guy, I was not the band leader. There was another guy that was his whole vision. He was a pretty type A personality guy, and he just wanted to do everything himself, and he said it was, it's the battle of the YouTube videos. we, in our market, we went and spent a lot of money to have this promo video made. And then, and we were out there trying to get more views than the other bands that were out there. And we weren't opposed to going through booking agents if they brought us a lead, if you will, but we didn't go through them exclusively. I mean, is there an argument to be made, one or the other? Why would an agent, why does the band need an agent? Should they be exclusive? What do you think about all that?
Well, I think that exclusivity is important if you're with an agent who can support it. In other words, bring in enough business. I don't know which agency would work as hard for someone that was not exclusive. And again, it's a lot depends on the trust factor. The agency, if they don't have something in writing, they need to know that they can trust that the callbacks, the referrals will all come back to them and come through them for their hard work. They deserve to have it work that way.
Right. So have you don't have to name any names, certainly, but have you ever had a situation where it was your lead and the band booked it kind of behind your back, if you will?
Yes, I did. And, that I'd say they were burnt after that. I wouldn't have anything to do with them. That's just not the way. It's not the right thing to do in this business. So, that's one of the rules. When someone books a job for you, you need to respect and appreciate that work and do the right thing.
Yeah, because it's really short-sighted in the grand scheme of things. I mean, cutting somebody out of a commission, or this is what they do. They work hard. They built up their reputation, and for a few bucks or whatever your motivation was, to basically go behind their back, and because all I can think would be that the client thinks that they can, if they don't go through the agent and they go directly to the band, that the band's going to give them a better deal. I guess that's the only thing that I could.
A lot of customers or clients will try that, and the right thing to do is for the band leader, which happens on my end. The band leader will say, "Gee, you'll have to talk to Norma because she does the booking. I play the music, but Norma handles the business," or whoever that agent is handles the business.
Yeah, and it's certainly a fine line. I remember back when my current band, when we first started, we were getting a lot of momentum, a lot of attention because we're an 8-piece band with a horn section, but we also play just regular bar gigs and stuff, and we were not an exclusive corporate or wedding band at all. So we were getting a lot of buzz in the market, and people, and I remember I got a call from an agent that I knew of him. And, he was just said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'd love to book your band. I love what you're doing, but all my bands are exclusive." And at that point, we'd only been a band for about 6 months, I think. And, and I had to tell him, I said, "Look, I don't have any, I'd love for you to book our band." And said, "But I cannot at this point, at this stage in the game, 6 months into this, I can't just hand over, basically the keys to the kingdom to one person. Because, I have 7 people. We've now, we spent, because we probably rehearsed for 6 months before we ever played our first gig. I had a bunch of guys thinking that we were going to get booked steadily. And I'm enough of I'm not a control freak, but I was mainly concerned about my band guys staying booked. Because if I didn't, I knew that they would get distracted or bored or they'd go off looking for other gigs. So I just didn't have that trust factor built up with this guy that he would keep us busy enough that I could just hand it over to him.
Sometimes it takes a while to make it worthwhile to become exclusive. And so you might work through an agent and also do your own bookings until there are enough bookings coming out of that agency that makes it makes sense for you to sign and make it exclusive.
Yeah.
It really depends.
Yeah, it's kind of like we needed to date before we got married, and he was talking about getting married on the first phone call. That's really where, where I would have been much more, and actually what ended up happening much later, we have a manager that also does all our booking for the band now, and that's exactly how he approached it. He just said, look, I know you probably think I'm full of it, so I'm going to prove it to you that I can book you. And I was like, okay. And then within the week, I remember I was standing outside a restaurant. He gave me a call. He said, okay, I got you booked on a Wednesday night at this place. I'm like, really? Yeah. He's just like, hold on to your hat, buddy, because there's more coming. And I was like, okay, I like this guy. He's calling me, and I know if I answer his phone call, there's going to be money at the other end. Some of my bookings in the past have been a smaller part of a band that I would put to work at a casino, and then I'd have them do maybe a restaurant, and on a Saturday, the trio that I had working would become a 6-piece band for a wedding or a bar mitzvah or whatever the case may be. So that was another way of keeping at least part of the band working more than 1 or 2 nights a week. Right. Yeah, I've seen bands do that. They'll do a smaller version, especially in Florida. There's a lot of beach, tiki bars and stuff just up and down the beaches, of course. And, they may not pay all that well, but they have a constant need for entertainment. But they don't need an 8-piece band. So there are some groups that, they'll size down to like a 4-piece and then, certain gigs. We've never done that. That's just not how we've chosen to do things. But certainly nothing wrong with that. Okay, so let's I really like to dive into the presentation, the band and everything, just the show, because I'm sure that's probably something that you would be passionate about. So let's talk about set lists. How many songs do you feel like it's a band that's at the top of their game should really know? I mean, should they know all styles? Should they stick with a certain style? What is your feeling about the set list? The bands that I book know all styles. And, they've got vast repertoire lists, and they can switch gears in a heartbeat. And that's another thing about these top bands. They have to be able to do that. And that comes with experience. So if it's a new band, some bands in the early days have to rehearse everything. And they can't do that. They can't switch gears. It's a whole rehearsed act. And that doesn't work so well for these social events that I book. So I think that's very important for the band to have a really good repertoire list that breaks down into top 40 and danceable hip-hop, some oldies, some Motown, even a little disco for the grandparents, and easy listening music for dinner service, cocktail hour, whatever. So, the repertoire list is really important, and that's something that every client looks at. Do you feel like bands should allow the client to choose their set list? So no, I don't think that's fair. What I have clients do is highlight songs that they definitely want to hear, highlight songs that they absolutely don't want to hear, and give the band a focus on where their thinking is and it has to be, or it should be, dance music, because if it's not danceable, it's going to be a pretty boring party. So that's the other thing. If the client is selecting music that they love that's not danceable, they need a little education, and that's got to be handled in a careful way to not offend, but to let them know that, gee, your favorite music is not going to make for a great party, Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In fact, I remember having, because we're a funk band at our. Now we certainly play R&B and soul and Motown and disco and stuff, but Reverend Barry and the Funk. So we had this young couple. Actually, it was just last year. We played their wedding, and the groom was from Ohio, so he was real into old school funk. And so for his set list, boy, he just had all these songs that he wanted to hear. And I even had to go back to him. And you would think most funk music is danceable. It is, but still doesn't mean that people will dance to it because they don't know the songs. And he was naming off all these songs that I was like, look, man, you have great taste in music. You and I could probably sit all night and listen to different tracks together. But you're at your wedding, I would highly suggest that we stick with these tunes because we've played 100 weddings and I know these songs will keep the dance floor full, and that's it. Yeah. Really what you want, right? And at the end of the day, and he was like, and you kind of had to meet him in the middle, and he's like, okay, tell you what, if you just play this one for me, that'll just be for the two of us. I was like, hey, one song, people can go get a drink and come back.
yeah, that works.
Yeah, but but I've had other people that they wanted to go through our whole song list, and then they had 10 other additional songs that didn't work, and I just but I really think if you do approach it professionally, and it's about the night, it's about to get all the guests who are there. And the time that they're going to have, they're going to have a great time. They're going to talk about, oh my God, your reception or that party or that fundraiser event was it was the event of the year. We had so much fun. We're still talking about it at the next week. I mean, that's really what you want.
Well, that's what it takes to book more parties. I say that each event should have babies. And
yeah, exactly. How do you feel should bands learn special songs?
Well, that's another thing. First of all, the band needs notice. You can't ask the band 2 days before the wedding to learn 3 new songs. And I usually give them up to 3 songs that the band will learn. And given at least 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks advance notice to learn these songs. And I think that that's fair. And it's rare that they have 3 songs. Usually it's 1 or 2. But I would give them up to 3, and again, with enough notice.
Okay. Yeah, because we're somewhat different because we stick with those sort of genres, and then it's a little awkward when people ask us to play something like by Ed Sheeran or whatever, which would be a song that we learn it for the wedding and then would literally never play it again. So yeah. Do you have a policy like if they want to choose more than 3 that they can pay for more? Like pay the band to learn
I've never had that situation present itself.
Okay.
I'd have to think about it and probably discuss it with bandleader, see how they feel about it. I think it's a bit much to ask a band that has a huge repertoire list to learn too many new songs. I think it's an imposition.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so now the bands, are they usually expected to bring their own PA systems, their own lighting rigs, and
lighting would be extra, but they're expected to appear with a good, solid sound system. Sometimes, if there's an event planner involved, they want total control, and they bring in their own AV. So in that case, it's taken care of, and it's really less work for the band. Of course, the band has to be comfortable with the quality of the AV people, but they're usually top notch. my experience has been always top-notch. So.
Okay. And then how do you feel as an agent, or how do you feel, or the clients feel about, like, if some of the cheating things that kind of go on, like if, you know, bands are reading charts, or if the singers are looking at lyrics on iPads, or even, you know, using recorded tracks. What do you feel about all that?
Well, I don't think it matters. If the band is exciting enough, the guests won't even notice. You know, as far as backing tracks, if you have great musicians playing along with backing tracks, probably other than the musicians in the audience or, you know, in the guest list, only they would know the difference. And I think that probably the front vocalist shouldn't be reading every song. I would think that a song here and there, but I don't think that makes for the best look.
Right, for sure. Okay, so let's kind of talk about, break down your typical client. So for weddings, when it comes to the band, what do you think are like the top, you know, 3 or 5 things that pretty much every client, what's most important to them?
Well, first of all, the band being not only on time, but enough in advance of the time so that nobody has to be nervous about the band showing up and showing up on time. You know, that's the first thing. The second is the appearance of the band, that everybody is well groomed and costumed with a great look, either color-wise. They don't have to be in matching costumes, but it should have a professional, sophisticated look.
Okay.
And it's hard to describe, but I know it when I see it. And that doesn't mean a suit and tie. That's not necessary. But it has to be a certain look. And
right.
The client would know the difference.
So it's okay to look. It's almost like what's the word I'm looking for? Like a business chic. So it's like you're, you know, maybe a suit jacket. You don't necessarily need a tie. Maybe you could have a somewhat flashy shirt underneath, that to where people look at you, they know you're one of the entertainers. You're not necessarily one of the guests, but you also don't look like you're about ready to, you know, go into a rock concert or
exactly. Business chic is a good description that I would use.
So what about the ladies, the female singers? I mean, if you know, should it be low-cut tops, anything like that, or should it be evening gowns? I mean, I
think that a great-looking cocktail dress, or even something with pants that has a good look, and again, sophisticated, chic. It doesn't have to be something expensive to pull off a good look. And I think it's the responsibility of the band leader to be sure that the females are coming out looking like ladies. Sexy's okay, but it can't be overdone. And don't forget, you don't want to outshine the bride. You need to let it be her day, and you don't want any of your female vocalists looking so hot that the focus is taken away from the bride if it's a wedding, and and instead on the vocalist.
Right.
So there's a fine line there. And again, you know it when you see it.
For sure. Okay, and so what else would you say are some of the top things for weddings as far as bands go?
Well, when it comes to what people are hearing, a lot of it is what they see. So each of the band members has to have a look that they're enjoying what they're doing and not looking bored, not yawning. Oh, that would drive me crazy if I saw anyone in the band yawn. That's a real no-no. I've seen bands where sometimes some of the players are looking just a bit too serious. I don't say that they have to have a smile on their face, but there's that look of wanting to be there and loving their job without a big smile on their face, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I think that's very important for each member of the band to look like they belong there and they're happy to be there and just grateful to be playing the music that they love.
Yeah, and there's a lot can go. If you're just moving to the music, you don't have to be up there, pulling off major dance moves. But if you're just bending the knee a little bit, bopping along to the beat, maybe looking at the drummer and nodding your head or whatever. I mean, that shows that you're actually somewhat into the music. And I could say as a guy that played many weddings, playing in a wedding band, playing a lot of music that I didn't care for, and I mean, there is some of because we all have our own, musical taste, and mine at the time was definitely not Rihanna or, I didn't mind playing some of the stuff, but others, it's like literally same two notes over and over and over for 4 minutes. Sometimes you got to fake it until you make it,
you really have to be able to fake it. Yep. If you've had a bad day, you can't bring it to work. Not when you're on stage, in my book. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so let's switch gears to corporate events. First of all,
I'd like to add one more thing, and that is the flexibility of the band. So the band is all set to play outside in the garden or on the grounds of the venue, and it starts to storm, and they've already been set up outside, and they have no choice but to bring everything back inside under the tent, and to be able to do that with a smile and not have an attitude or be annoyed. It's just part of the job, and it happens, and it's beyond our control. So that's important for the band to be able to say, no problem, or to be set up in one end of the room and for some reason there happens to be a leak in the roof or something and they have to reset on the opposite side of the room. It happens, and it can't become an issue. So I thought I'd mention that.
Well, that brings up a good point. Like in Florida, certain times of the year, there's a lot of rain. And how do you feel about, if a client approaches you about a venue that I can think of one popular wedding venue right here now that doesn't really have an option for coming inside. What do you think about requiring a client to have a tent? Just say, look, we can only play if there's a tent available. If there's.
I think that's an important point. Unless there's a contract that says, I have a contract now for something happening April 30th, and if it's a drive-in event, and there's a lot of AV, little mini fireworks and everything else, if it drizzles, it could still happen. But if it's a hard rain, the event has to be postponed. So the contract says that the date will be rescheduled at with a mutual agreement between the band and the client. So, that's something that happens when you have to add that to your contract, that a cancellation can take place, but the date will be replaced. And sometimes there's a little bit of a little money involved. So it depends. It really it depends on a lot. What type of event it is, and if it has to be postponed, if there's going to be a surcharge. So, each event is a little different from the next, but that's something that has happened in my past. So.
Yeah, I've had a few weddings where I had to kind of think of a clever way to because with a wedding, I mean, the idea of rescheduling a wedding at the last minute doesn't really seem too feasible.
Well, because, when is it going to be rescheduled for? Is it going to be within the next month or two? Will there be an available date that works for the client as well as the band? So, it really presents some obstacles that have to be overcome. But it happens. One solution that we seem to come up with that worked out pretty well is I think there's tent companies here in, at least in Florida, and I'm sure it's got to be the same other places, where they would allow you to reserve a tent up until a certain number of days prior to the event, and then you just basically looked at the forecast. And I would say something like, if there was, I can't remember how I worded it, if there's 50 to 60% chance of rain, it's required that you have a tent, and we just have to set up under it, because we have $40,000 worth of equipment. We own all this stuff. And it wouldn't really be different if we hired a sound company. I mean, they would be like, okay, who's going to pay for my gear if it gets rained on? And the client seemed amenable to that, because my other point would be like, look, it's not just about us. What are you going to do for your guests if it rains? I mean, and there's nowhere else to go. They can't really go inside. Yeah, you can't send them home. Yeah, exactly. You can't go to the restaurant down the street. Hey, it's me and 200 of my closest friends. Do you mind if we come in? So okay, all right. So let's switch gears a little bit to the corporate event world. So for the unfamiliar, what in your mind encompasses a corporate event? I mean, what types of events are those? Well, it could be for a small company or a large company. It could be, a corporate job is for a business, and it's the guest list is made up of sometimes clients of that particular business, the employees and their spouses, and it really depends on the size of the business or the corporation as to what the budget is going to be and the crowd size. So that really varies. It varies greatly. We've done like a 40th anniversary for a trucking company where they had 600 guests. We've done corporate dinners for 10 people where we brought in a comedian. So It really depends.
Okay, so those are some of the reasons. I was trying to give what are some of the reasons. I know that we've been hired by a beer distributor just for their company Christmas party for the last 2 or 3 years in a row.
Holiday parties are big with companies, yes.
Yeah, for sure. It's a big event. The funny thing about that event is I think they also give the employee bonuses on our first break. So you've got there's like 500 people there, and then they give everybody their checks and then the room clears out, and it's like, it's like, yeah, the band is great, but we really just kind of wanted our check. And the place kind of empties out. But.
we do events for a bank, and there are lots of speeches, so the band doesn't really play that much, but the band has to be there waiting in the wings as soon as the speeches are over. They've got to be back on playing again, and then there's maybe a visual presentation on a big screen, and then the band has another break, but then they still have to be waiting in the wings ready to jump back on. So very often a corporate job, you're not playing long and hard like you would at a wedding, but it's about being there. And I would say that holidays, or the Christmas holidays, are the biggest, most popular time for corporate to have a party, other than an anniversary or rolling out of a new product, something like that.
Yeah, and we've played events where the crowd is great. I think it maybe if they like the company the Christmas parties are fine because they're all employees. They work together. Of course they drink together. Things get a little loose and they have a good time. But then we've also played corporate events. Like I think once we played one in Miami, and I could tell the people that were there were like from around the country, and they were all there for a meeting. These people didn't know each other, and so so it was a room full of strangers. And so the band, nobody paid any attention to the band because, they're not going to get out there and dance with a bunch of strangers. I mean, it was a handful of them at the end of the night. Yeah, and it was just really, it was a very, I've said that before. It seems like with the corporate events can sometimes be the highest paying gigs, but sometimes the most boring. Just because you never know what you're walking into and why the company is hiring you. It's kind of one of those things where regardless, you just go out there, give it your best, collect the check at the end of the night and be thankful,
Yeah, you'll have an employee appreciation party where, depending, it could be a really hot dance party or a real dud. So, and it's not the band's fault, It's all about who's there. So. Yeah.
So for corporate events, then, what are the main criteria that they're looking for? What are some of the questions that they ask you when they're booking?
Well, they're looking for the repertoire list, and they're looking for usually a video, some kind of a presentation to give them a hint. Unless they've seen the band already, if they've seen the band at another event, that makes it a lot easier. But if they haven't seen the band and they're asking for my recommendation on the band, I will send them a bio, song list, and some video clips showing them what the band looks like, sounds like, and sell them on that. So
let's talk about that a little bit as far as I guess because that's kind of like marketing collateral for the band. Is the video the most important thing, you feel?
Oh, yeah. Like I say, unless they've been to a party or an event where that band has played, and that's why they're calling and asking for it, if they're asking to be recommended to a band, they've got to base it on what they see and hear. So that's the sell. That's part of the sell.
So with the better video promotions that you've seen, what do they have in common? Are they doing 30-second clips of 50 songs? Are they doing
I like
cameras or?
I like just 30 seconds, maybe just a bit longer of each song, so that they can show a whole bunch of variety in maybe under 10 minutes. 10 minutes is long. Because especially, if it's a busy executive, they don't have a lot of patience, and they've got to see it real quick. So I would say that putting this video together, definitely keep it just a few lines of of these top songs that you're selling.
Okay. And then what about like do they need to hire a professional camera crew, a big light show, big stage? What do you think?
Well, I think nowadays there's so many ways of doing it inexpensively. I haven't produced them myself, so I can't really say. But I think that the band would probably have to pull in some favors to try to save on what they're spending, because it can become pretty costly to put together a good 10 minutes. You know, I think if the band could have someone come out to film them on a job and then do an edit, that might be the way to go. So I don't know how much editing time costs these days, but that might be the easiest way to do it, to be filmed on the job. And again, it would probably have to be not a private job. It would have to be a job at a club or a restaurant where it wouldn't be awkward to have them filmed. Then get the edit done so that just pull out maybe 8 to 10 minutes of snippets of songs. And that way you give them a whole bunch of variety in just a few minutes.